doing a little rant as I'm driving down the road here with my dual record phone. And just wanted to talk about some things I remember. It's been coming up on 50 years I met the Lord late February in 1975. And remember when I was a new Christian, I went and grabbed my old King James Bible and read it through hungrily the first year. And then I got a New American Standard Bible and read that through the next 3 years and memorized a lot of scriptures out of it and a lot of time studying and word studies. And my first book I bought was Strong's Concordance. So that's just where I was at. And I do remember something, though, that I wanted to talk about, and that was about the coming of the Lord. That when I read through the scripture, it sure seemed to me that I noticed that the writers of scripture, New Testament, seemed to think that Jesus was coming in their lifetime. They were looking for him to come, and they taught that. And Jesus, it seemed like he said that too. And so I was really befuddled at why in the world he would wait up to 2,000 years now to come. You know, what is the delay? What's the holdup? It didn't make any sense to me. I was a little bit kind of tempted to be miffed at the Lord for this because it was not understandable and didn't make sense. You know, I mean, why would he do all that and say all that and have his disciples say all this stuff? And so I came to a point where it seemed like later, like it was kind of explained. A pastor explained that in a message on a Sunday, and I was, well, okay, whatever, and just left it alone. And I couldn't study the book of Revelation. No matter, I tried, it just, no way, didn't make any sense. But it seemed to me that I began to notice in my readings and studyings that, I'm trying to turn my heat down here, it's getting hot. It seemed that the Jews in Jesus' day missed him coming as their king because he didn't come the way they thought. They kind of had a macho mind of a David king and a Solomon that was going to come, the son of David. This would be a king that would kick everybody else's butt. He would be really a great person and rule the world and bring the peace of Solomon. You know, Solomon means peace. I think that Solomon thought he was the Prince of Peace. You know, he was the Prince of Israel, the king, and he was kind of the Prince of Peace. Well, when he did come in the year 30, was it? Or somewhere around there. Manifested anyway, and started doing his ministry. That was a beginning. He told his disciples several times, as you were taught in the beginning. So there was a beginning when he started his ministry and chose his 12 to follow him and began training them. That was the beginning of something. In the beginning, I kind of think actually that was the beginning of John 1:1. In the beginning was the Word, Jesus, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God, the beginning of his ministry. That's what that was. So, but the Jews were really looking for this David figure to come be this, kind of like when Saul came. You know, the people were looking for a glorious human figure. They didn't know God. And David came, he was a worshiper and a warrior. And so people thought that's what was coming. That's what they were looking for. And when Jesus came as a humble carpenter, without lineage of Levite, and they just couldn't see him being their king. Come on. This isn't him. And they couldn't accept it. Well, I find it equally interesting that Christians haven't been able to see that Jesus came. They haven't been able to see his coming, what it was about. Christians are looking for a different type of coming, a different king than the Bible talks about. They're again looking for a David. So I think they're both equally carnal. I've always kind of thought that the Jews were really carnal and they really missed it and didn't get it. But I also now think that the Christian church today has missed it just as big, because they're looking for this king that isn't going to come. They missed it. Now, how? I used to wonder, like I said, how did they miss it? The disciples, they were with Jesus. Face-to-face communication about his plans, and they were in on it. They were his guys. And then he was crucified, rose again, revealed himself to them, and spent 40 days with them before he ascended. And what do you think he talked about? I think he talked about what they would be going through. He spent a lot of time in Matthew 23, 24, Luke 21, Mark 13, I think it is, talking about, specifically, he was talking to them when he said these things. You watch out. Watch out that you're not deceived and led astray. And there will be wars and rumors of wars and all this other stuff. He was talking to them. He was telling them what was about to happen. And then in his 40-day time before he arose, or ascended, I'm sure he talked about that a lot again. And so somehow we think today that they missed it. They were wrong. They thought he was coming, but they missed it. They didn't know Jesus well enough somehow. They're the ones that eyeball to eyeball sweat with him, worked with him, talked with him, camped with him, fished with him. They were the ones that he poured into them. And then the 40-day time. And Jesus himself said it. All these things will happen in this generation. So somehow he missed it too? Wait a minute. Who is missing it here? Really? Who's being carnal? The Jews were carnal and missed Jesus coming. The Christians today are carnal. They're missing it. Because the way that Jesus came, think about it now. We always say, okay, how's he going to return? The same way that he left. He, as a human, kind of flew up into the sky into a cloud and disappeared. Well, what else does it say? It says that as the lightning flashes from east to west, he will come. There will be this great trumpet call. He will come. Well, that doesn't sound like him standing in a field and flying up in the air, or coming in a cloud over a field that they were standing there looking at. So there are different ways that it describes his return. Sun from east to west shining, all this destruction that will come. He's coming to judge his enemies. Jesus came to bring a sword. I think we missed it. Jesus did come. He talked about, how do we interpret things like how he came in the clouds? There are scriptures in the Old Testament that talk about God, like in Isaiah 12, 13, 14. God came down. God came down and came in the clouds. Well, God didn't literally come down, and nobody saw him as a man in the cloud. either. Those were expressions of how God chose to say he was coming. It wasn't literal. And the whole book of Revelation, I understand it a lot better now, because it's not literal. It's a dream. It's a vision. It's a picture. It's a video. It's hyperbolic. None of it's literal. You talk about literalness. There's the serpent he talks about in Revelation 20. There's the dragon and the serpent and the devil and Satan. They're all the same expressions of the same thing. And they're thrown into an abyss. It's all spiritual stuff. It's not literal. There's no abyss well that's got no bottom that he's thrown into. 1,000 years. That's not literal. There's nothing literal about any of that. We've got to quit being carnal. I'm saying literal. Well, that's carnal to think of those things that way. They're spiritually discerned. Joseph, his dream, what was it? Sun, moon, and stars. Here are round bodies out in the sky are going to bow. The stars, the moon, the sun, they're round things, and they're going to bow to Joseph. That's not literal. Round things can't bow. It was typology. It was just hyperbolic spiritual language. They somehow had no trouble understanding that wasn't literal. That it was, they knew they were going to bow down to him. That he was going to rule over them. And they were unhappy about it. They hated him. There was nothing literal. That Jesus coming in the clouds and the stars falling from the sky, the sun losing its brightness, none of that is any more literal than the dream that Joseph had with the stars and the sun, the moon bowing to him. No more literal at all. They were equally parabolic. So I just had to rant on that a little bit. I remember noticing back in the 80s how carnal I thought the Jews were to think of Jesus coming and them not accepting it, and then realizing that we're doing the same thing. We are the Jews now in that way, where we didn't get it. There is so much involved in that would give us a better understanding of the whole Bible if we could hear that. The whole purposes of God. It would mean so much more to us. Revelation means so much more to me now. It's a wonderful book. I'm not worried about an end judgment. That happened. The things that Matthew 24 talked about in the King James, it says the end of the world. Well, there's no end of the world. That was the end of the age. Going to the ends of the world to preach the gospel. That already happened too. Colossians 1:21. Romans 8, 1? I forget now. It says that the gospel was preached to every creature. Colossians 1:21. Look it up. That happened. And what happens when the gospel gets preached? Then the end will come. What end? Not the end of the world, not the end of time. There's no end of world or end of time in the Bible. None. It was the end of the age. What happened? Didn't the temple get torn down in 70 AD? Less than 40 years after Christ said, in this generation all this will happen. Didn't that happen? That was the temple being torn down. That was the end of the age. There hasn't been a temple built since. It was the end of the Mosaic law. There has not been sacrifices for sin The whole system of the law of Leviticus was done away right then and there. It was an age that was done. Doesn't that make one heck of a lot of sense? Yeah, I think so. Toodaloo.